All right. Well, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And welcome to our first webinar of the year. We do anticipate having several more going on this spring and hopefully continuing into the fall. I'm Megan Marrero. I am the president of the National Marine Educators Association, and we are happy to have you all here and to host this event and talk about an issue that's really important. And we are all committed to, doing the best by our students and bringing more people of color into our field. And so I think Dijanna is going to have a lot to say to share with us some of the strategies to do that, and also talk about her career and some of the work that she's been doing. So I want to just take a minute at the beginning of the webinar here to tell you a little bit about NMEA, because I know not all of you are NMEA members, and we did purposely want to be really inclusive in this webinar and invite as many people as possible. And I hope that we're reaching some new audiences. I hope that some of you are reaching out to us for the first time. So I'd like to move on. Here's a little bit about us. So we are a member organization of around 800 members or so. Our big event is our annual conference, and it moves around the country each year. This year it will be in July at the University of New Hampshire, and it's a great event to meet other like-minded marine educators. And we are a part of a network of other marine education organizations all around the world. So when you join NMEA, you really become connected to many other marine educators who are doing this kind of amazing work all over the world. Some of the reasons to join and things that you'll get, we get a subscription to our current journal, which is our Journal of Marine Education, and an opportunity, of course, to be an author and to write your own journal articles. We welcome articles from our members, so hope that you'll consider that as well. Lots of opportunities for networking and mentorship. I know for me has really made a huge difference in my career to be a part of this network. We do offer some discounts with some aquariums and science centers, and we do anticipate, like I said, having future webinars and resources. We're in the process of updating our website so that it'll become much more user-friendly, and there'll be a lot more new resources pretty soon. Fingers crossed that'll be really soon. Anyway, please check us out, check out our website, and at least follow us on social media. We hope that some of you will definitely consider being a member if you're not already, although I know I see a lot of familiar names, and I know a lot of you are members, and I hope that you feel that your membership is something that's really important part of the work that you do. I do want to not spend too much time on me and turn it over to our speaker tonight. So Dijanna, I am going to turn that over to you, and let's see, make you the presenter. And Dijanna is an NMEA member, and she is very willing to share her story and to talk about a topic that she's really passionate about. So Dijanna, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I know I can't do it as good a justice as you can. Can you, let's see, do you see the presenter control now?
Hey, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, that's great. I see the presenter control. I think we are ready to go.
Okay, take it away.
All right. I want to start off by saying how I'm so excited to be here and just to have the opportunity to share a little bit about my career as a person of color in a STEM field, marine science, and some tools and strategies that we've developed over the years to help engage people of color in STEM. So glad to be here. Thank you all for joining. That's pretty cool. This is a topic that I'm so passionate about, and anytime I have the opportunity to share, I am all over that. So I hope you guys get something out of this and just kind of join me on this journey as I'm going to become open and share with you my journey into STEM and what that might be like for people of color, and how we as educators and ocean enthusiasts, wherever you might be, what we can do to help support people of color as they pursue careers in science, technology, and engineering. So
Dijanna, we're not seeing your webcam yet.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Let me enable that. Are you seeing my screen?
No, not yet.
Okay, hold on. Let me figure something out here. Okay, I think I just shared my screen.
There's your screen. I'm going to turn myself off. We want to see you. There's
Can you guys see
Dijanna.
me?
Yes, much better.
Hey, there we are. So I think I was doing my thank yous. So a huge thank you to Megan, the president of the National Marine Educators Association. And I also wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to the expanding audience chair, DJ Cass, for introducing me to some of the opportunities to share my story here on this platform. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity. All right, so you wanted me to share a little bit about myself first. So here we go. This is actually my first webinar. So if I'm not looking directly at the screen and if I look funny, I'm going to apologize in advance. This is just how I show up. So here we go. A little bit about myself. So I'm a marine scientist and an educator. I received my bachelor's degree in marine biology from UCLA, and I went on to pursue a PhD in marine science from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Currently, I'll tell you guys, you'll get my whole story before we end, but currently I'm a teacher and I teach middle school science in California. I'm currently in one of the middle school science classrooms, and I'm also a social justice and activism teacher. In the summertime, I direct social justice and activism programs and facilitate people of color affinity groups within the independent school system. So my background is in science and marine biology. My passion is for education and encouraging and inspiring access for all people to engage in science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm also a public speaker, and I provide seminars that help people facilitate conversations around racism and race when it comes to engaging in STEM fields. So that's kind of a little background about me professionally. And on a personal side, I am a wife, a mother of 3 school-aged children, scuba diver, current aeronautics enthusiast. I'm getting my private pilot license to fly planes. A Los Angeles Dodger fan. I don't know, the list goes on. Poet, part-time dancer. I like to do it all, but that's kind of a little bit of me on a personal side and a professional side. The most important thing that I wanted to share with you guys today is my commitment. And I'm committed to inspiring the next generation of young scientists and engineers to follow their dreams and pursue careers in science and engineering, specifically targeting young women and people of color. So today, as we explore topics of people of color in STEM fields, I'm going to share with you the following. I'm going to start off sharing with you my personal story in STEM and my personal journey. And I'm going to use my personal journey as a lens to explore the challenges that exist for people of color that are pursuing or interested in STEM fields. After that, I hope that we can discuss some tools and strategies that have been implemented and that are currently being developed to support people of color in STEM fields. And then at the end, I hope we all leave here encouraged and inspired, formal educator, informal educator, just a person who's curious about the topic. I hope we're all inspired to enact real change to help support all people in their pursuit of science, tech, engineering, and math. So let's do it. Let's go into my story, which is kind of personal, but I hope you guys enjoy it and take something from it, because I think it's a pretty powerful story through the lens of diversity and inclusion. I wrote most of it down so I didn't forget the details, so I'm going to kind of read through it. So story time. So this is what I call my STEM story. I'm always encouraging women and scientists of color to share and write down their STEM story. So here, this is mine. My STEM story starts on a beach over 30 years ago. My family happened to be at this beach during low tide, and as my brother and I played in the sun, between the waves and the rocks, I started to notice the colorful creatures that were in these tide pools. I mean, bright red and green multicolored sea stars, hundreds of tiny barnacles, cryptic crabs scuffling along the crevices of the rocks, green sea anemones, shells, mussels, snails, limpets, colorful algae, red, brown, green. I watched the waves slam against the rocks and the sea kelp move back and forth with the swell. What was really fascinating back then was the little tiny birds that were at the beach that would constantly be like pecking at the sand. I would sit for hours just watching the birds run when the waves went back to get whatever it was they were looking for, and then run away from the waves because they reminded me of myself. I didn't know how to swim back then, and the ocean kind of terrified me. So that was kind of cool. But I started to realize that the ocean was this dynamic and amazing place. It was those summers, way back when, that my curiosity exploded into an obsession with the ocean. So on this slide right here, this is a picture of one of the beaches that we used to frequent, and you could see at low tide, it'd be pretty cool, rocky intertidal to explore. I was intrigued and terrified by all things ocean right there. The powerful yet soothing. Even today, I find it hard to articulate the beauty and the experience that I had as a young child at the beach. And we didn't go that often, but when we went, I would stare and sit at the beach for hours and hours and hours, just waiting for the next cool thing to discover. That takes me to my next slide. My mom is an artist, and this is one of the paintings that she said I inspired her to make, which is a painting of me just staring at the ocean, which is kind of what I did every time we went there. I was full of curiosity. How do sea animals make it happen out there? Why is the ocean green in some places and blue in other places? What causes waves? Why do they come in sets? Like, what's sand made out of? What are those birds eating? And the main question that I would always ponder is, am I really safe out here? Because the ocean scared me. It intrigued me, but it scared me. It holds so many mysteries, I don't know. But I would spend hours out there. I would wait and ask questions and wait. So as a young African-American girl in California, looking at the ocean, my STEM story starts with curiosity. Curiosity, a strong and compelling desire to learn something new. My curiosity was the driving force to be reckoned with. As I reflect on my experience overall, curiosity it led me to pursue a career in science. One of my favorite quotes is from Walt Disney. When you're curious, you find lots of interesting things to do. And let me tell you, this was just the beginning of a very interesting sequence of events that led me to where I am today. You see, I went on to study marine biology at UCLA, and I earned a bachelor's degree in marine bio with a minor in atmospheric science. Under the guidance of Dr. Bill Hamner and Dr. Peggy Fong, I was able to participate in some field studies where I found myself in some really beautiful locations. This is all me following the path of curiosity, where I had the opportunity to study the social dominance behavior of bottlenose dolphins in captivity. After that experience, we also spent some time in the field locally in the Channel Islands, which are right off the coast of California, studying primary productivity in the kelp forest all along the coast. It's pretty cool. I even attempted to become a scientific research scuba diver at this point through the marine biology program at UCLA, even though I had yet to learn how to swim. Like, no joke, tried to scuba dive. All I could do was float and dog paddle, but I was so like gung-ho to be in the ocean, I went for it and started to scuba dive. My senior year of UCLA, I got an internship, and this is where my journey kind of changed a little bit and where my curiosity just started to explode, like literally explode. I got an internship at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute here in California, located in Monterey. And my internship was as a communications intern. So my job was to create websites that communicated a story about all the research that was happening at this research institute. MBARI, as it's known, is a unique oceanographic research institute where scientists and engineers work together and they develop tools and methods to study the ocean. So my job as an intern there was just to ask questions to all of these real working scientists in the field about what they do, why do they think it's important, and what impact is it going to have on, everybody's everyday life. So my questioning led me to become very involved in various research groups while I was there. And this is when my life started to change. As a communications intern, I was able to join a variety of expeditions at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. The first expedition I joined was with the benthic ecology and biology group that at the time was led by Dr. James Berry and also Dr. Bob Breinhoek. And they were studying genetics and the physiological adaptations that cold sea or deep sea animals had to their environment. I later had the opportunity to go on an ocean chemistry expedition with Dr. Peter Brewer, where I learned really cool things. I was introduced to this really cool contraption called a Niskin bottle, a gas chromatograph, and the importance of the air-sea interface. I spent over 20 days at sea working on these different projects. I had the opportunity to annotate digital video of the marine life that they were discovering. I even had my chance to operate a remotely operated vehicle at the bottom of the ocean. And it was also the first time I actually saw the deep. As a child, I spent a lot of time looking at the ocean and wondering what was in it. And here, I found myself actually exploring the ocean, and not just the ocean, but the deepest depths of the ocean, where the mysteries really, truly exist. I was inspired. I was so inspired by my time during this internship that I decided to get a PhD in marine biology. And not just any PhD, but a PhD in deep sea marine biology. Cool. So I went on to grad school at the University of California, Santa Barbara, under the direction of Dr. James Childress, and had amazing opportunities for research, discovery, and exploration. I'm going to list a list of things. This is all going back to Walt Disney's quote of, when you're curious, many things can happen. So for grad school, I had the opportunity to explore and study hydrothermal vent environments, okay? This is the deep sea oasis located along mid-ocean ridges all across our planet. This slide kind of shows you a brief kind of distribution of where you find these sites. I traveled all over the world and dove multiple times on various different ships and submarines. Over 20 Alvin dives to the bottom of the ocean and 70 dives using the deep rovers and the Russian near submersibles, where we explored the physiological adaptations of deep sea animals. It was here where I got to develop and improve a high pressure respirometry system to study the metabolic physiology of these animals that actually exist in these environments that are considered extreme. I also was able to discover novel proteins and fully describe the heat shock response in animals adapted to hydrothermal vent environments. One of the highlights of my graduate career was the ability to be the first lab in the world to maintain animals that were collected from the deepest parts of the ocean at these hydrothermal vents in our laboratory for study for up to 9 months. It's really cool. So these animals normally, they live at extreme pressures, extreme depth. We designed aquariums where we could pressurize the aquariums, recreate hydrothermal vent environments so we could keep the animals alive in our lab in Santa Barbara to do studies. And that's how I was able to fully describe the heat shock protein response in many of these different animals. So that was my graduate work that led me to do some pretty cool things. Now, here's one of my favorite pictures. This is located at 9 degrees north, East Pacific Rise at about 2,700 meters depths of the ocean. I got to actually go there and study the giant tube worms and the lipids and the mussels and all that cool stuff. It was some amazing stuff. And I started to realize that I was one of few people that physically got to go down to the bottom of the ocean and do this work. So a couple of years later, we were contacted by a film company that James Cameron, director of Titanic and Avatar, wanted to make a movie so that he could take these environments and share the awesomeness and amazingness of these environments with the entire world. And I was invited to join that expedition and help them come up with a film that would engage all audiences on the wonders of the deep sea. That was pretty amazing. You know, I went from my curiosity to now actually sharing some of these cool, mysterious things with the world and telling the story of the hydrothermal vents. That's a picture of me with Mr. James Cameron right there. We went on a press tour and an educational tour all across the country at museums and schools and even at different theaters, sharing the amazingness of the ocean and the deep sea hydrothermal vent environments. Now, it was around this time when my work kind of shifted from deep sea research to deep sea and ocean education and outreach. And as I started doing the outreach, I was traveling all over the country and I was seeing so many young people and young people of color that were so engaged and on fire for the ocean. It was actually quite inspiring. However, as I sat down to reflect, I began to realize that why aren't these young people actually, you know, pursuing careers in ocean science and marine science? And it occurred to me that there must be some sort of disconnect and some sort of problem. Lots of kids love the ocean and the mysteries that lie in the ocean, but there was something happening that was preventing them from pursuing careers or staying interested in this as they went into college, graduate school, and then pursued a career. That's when I started to realize that my work as a deep sea marine biologist studying the hydrothermal vent environments actually has some striking similarities to my journey in becoming a scientist in a STEM field. So you see, the work that I did at hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean, hydrothermal vent environments are characterized by the following. Number one, they're geographically isolated, okay? Physical and chemical barriers exist between these habitats. So these habitats that I'm studying could be separated by tens to hundreds of kilometers. They're actually really isolated in terms of their geographical distribution. When you look right here, you can see there are hydrothermal vent locations located all over the globe, yet they're in very geographic isolated areas. The next characteristics that I began to think about the vents was that they're considered to be hostile and extreme environments. I mean, the animals that live here, this picture right here was taken again at the East Pacific Rise 9 degrees north, 2,700 meters at the bottom. These animals are dealing with extreme stuff. Number one, extreme pressure. The animals that persist and thrive at hydrothermal vent environment have to deal with extreme pressures. The ones that I studied, 4,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, that's huge compared to the 14 pounds per square inch that I currently am experiencing right now. Another thing that's characterized is the extreme temperatures at vents. It can go from near freezing all the way to over 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Last thing, toxic environment. It's full of hydrogen sulfide, metals, methane, copper, zinc, iron, hydrogen dissolved in the fluids. The degassing of magma leads to the additional environment for these animals to persist. Many people don't even know these environments exist because they're so deep and so far away, they just don't see them. I mean, scientists didn't even discover them until 1977. Something to think about there. And the last thing—
Dijanna, I just want to jump in for 1 sec. We have somebody on the phone. We're getting some background noise. So everybody please make sure your phone lines are muted? I'm not able to mute whomever it is. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that.
Are you guys still with me? Everybody with me?
We're with you.
All right. The last two things I wanted to say, they didn't know the environment existed. It wasn't very visible. And that these locations, when I studied them, they're really hard to get to. I mean, it requires special equipment. You can't get to a hydrothermal vent without a deep diving sub that can withstand extreme pressures, okay? It requires a lot of logistical support, a support ship, special equipment, resources, scientists, engineers. There's a lot going on when you study a hydrothermal vent environment. So I started to think about how that could compare to my experience pursuing a career in STEM as a person of color. And here's some of the analogies that I came up with. One, a hydrothermal vent environment is geographically isolated. Well, when I reflect on my experience going through and pursuing this career, I had to deal with a lot of social isolation as a person of color and social loneliness. There weren't a lot of people like me as I went through college and graduate school, and even as a professional working scientist in the field. It was isolating. There were invisible barriers that seemed to separate me from many of my peers, mentors, and professors. So just like hydrothermal vents can be geographically isolated and have chemical and physical barriers, I thought that there were invisible barriers during my social isolation as I pursued this career. The next analogy, hostile environment. So the hydrothermal vent environments are characterized as hostile. I mean, temperatures are extreme. They're dealing with lots of pressure. There's no light down there. I mean, the list goes on and on. And when I reflected on my own experience as a person of color pursuing a STEM field, oftentimes I found myself in quote unquote a hostile environment. On my path to pursue this career, I found myself dealing with things like systemic racism, privilege, dealing with systems of white supremacy that were still in place. Even though I went through school in the 2000s, I found I did encounter places where I was like, oh my gosh, this is not good. Like, I definitely didn't feel welcomed and belonged. I also experienced the pressure of kind of representing my entire race, being one of the few people of color doing marine science, that all eyes were on me. Like, if I can do it well, everyone else in my race could do it well. And that felt like a lot of weight and pressure on me. I also experienced the burden of having to feel grateful all the time, constantly code switching between my own cultural community and the cultural community that I saw in science. It was a lot dealing with cultural and class discomfort. So some of the experience that I had going through and trying to pursue a career in STEM, I could say that I had to go through a hostile environment, similar to the hostile environment that these deep sea creatures had to deal with. The other question that often came up was, do people of color actually exist in marine biology? Where are other people of color? I thought I was very racially visible, yet socially invisible. Okay, just like hydrothermal vent sites, they're there, but you can't actually see them. Although they're there and thriving, they're covered by lots and lots of ocean, and it requires lots of equipment and resources to get to. That gets me to my last point, was the support. In order to study and find a hydrothermal vent environment, it requires a lot of support. Whether that's the support of a vessel, the support of a submarine. I mean, technically, you can't get down there without the support of a titanium sphere that's protecting you from the extreme pressures at the bottom of the ocean. I found personally, as I pursued this career, that I had to be mentally tough, just as hard as the titanium sphere that was protecting me from the 4,000 pounds of pressure at the bottom of the ocean. I felt like I had to build a mentally tough, protective layer around me as I went through and pursued my career. Educational resources, economic resources. I remember one thing, I had a lot of friends that were interested in marine biology, and they had the opportunity to go take classes and study sea turtles in the summer and go here for an internship, or their parents would pay for them to have all these experiences. I didn't have those economic resources to have marine science experiments or experiences. I kind of had to figure other ways to be involved and add experience to my resume so that I could get a job. So after studying hydrothermal vent environments and living through and pursuing a career in STEM by studying these really cool creatures, I learned some lessons from the vents that I can help apply to my own work in social justice activism. How do you support somebody or a person of color that's going to pursue a career in the STEM field, which they might have to deal with a hostile environment. They might feel some social isolation. They might lack the resources to make it happen. How do we as educators that are committed to instilling change, how do we help? Now, before I go through that, I want to show you guys a couple cool pictures from some of my explorations. So I already talked about the geographical isolation. This right here, it says Pacific Rise, but I believe this is in the Guaymas Basin. Another pretty cool picture of Riftia and some limpets right there. I talked about how the environment was not visible. This is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This is a site called Snake Pit, 3,600 meters. This was one of my deepest dives, really cool. Didn't know it was there. We just kind of happened upon it and it was amazing. And then it's hard to get to. You have to use submarines to get there. Menesquin, Mid-Atlantic Ridge, 1,200 meters. Another one of my favorite dives. This is the barriers to get there. Like literally, this is the Russian Mir sub. It can go almost 4,000 meters depth. You need special equipment to get to the bottom. The Lao Back Arc Basin, 2,750 meters. Another really cool environment. Deep, requires lots of resources. It's hostile in terms of the chemistry, yet it exists. And animals persist and survive. So I want to step forward to how do I connect all this to my work in engaging people of color in STEM and supporting educators, both formal and informal educators, to do the work necessary to encourage young people from diverse backgrounds to engage. This picture was taken from the colorofstem.org website, which is a really cool website that shares the stories of different people of color that work in the STEM fields. So the things we have to deal with: social isolation, hostile environments, visibility, and support. What can we do as educators and people who are interested in this topic? What can we do to help out? Well, one, what's to be done? We can recognize the environment that people of color may have to deal with. It might be hostile, and we can just know that that exists. Hostile environments exist for people of color right now. But what I want to encourage you is I don't want you to be afraid to engage in conversations about race, privilege, equity, and inclusion in STEM among these topics. It's really important to be these topics make people feel uncomfortable. Some people don't like to talk about race or racism as it exists right now and how that might affect a young person pursuing a career in STEM. But don't be afraid to engage in these conversations. Try and create a space where you can have these conversations with your colleagues, with your peers, and even with your students. Another thing that I encourage educators to do is to make their presentations culturally relevant. Do some research about your audience and know where they're coming from. Know a little bit about the environment that you're going into so that you can connect culturally with these people on a way that's meaningful and can also lead to long-term change. Do something. Review your practices, develop strategies to support engagement across cultures. Take-home messages. So I've had the opportunity to go across the country and hold all-day workshops on how to engage young people of color in STEM fields. These are some things I want you to be inspired to do. So together, we can totally nurture the natural curiosity of young people through engagement, mentorship, and understanding. And I want to highlight understanding, understand that they're going through something. This is a difficult thing, yet there are tools and resources that exist to help support them as they continue to pursue a career in STEM. Want more information? I have a whole team of people that hold seminars, and I can link you to the website. This is just my contact information. I kind of want to I've talked a lot. I kind of want to transition to the Q&A portion. So thank you for your attention. And I hope we get deeper into some of these strategies through a discussion with the Q&A portion of the talk. All right. Meg, do you want to kind of take in and moderate the discussion?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. We're getting a lot of wonderful comments and feedback, and certainly appreciate that. We have some really good questions, so please keep them coming, people. The first one I see is from Susan, and she says, did you have a specific mentor who helped you build your titanium sphere? And if so, what did that person do that was most helpful?
Okay, got it. So yes, I did. And the mentors in my life, there's three that I'm going to mention. I actually was very fortunate to have a very strong family support system. So my mom was my shield, and my mom was also a young artist, kind of trying to engage in a community where she was one of the only people of color. So she had a lot of that experience to share with me. But as I went to grad school, I also had mentorship in the form of an amazing woman scientist at UC, Gretchen Hoffman, who was able to kind of somehow get through the barriers and the social isolation and help support me and be a safe person for me to talk about some of the things I was going through on a day-to-day basis to help me get through. So you can be that person. It's being willing to engage in those conversations and be comfortable engaging in a conversation about race and privilege and how that might be impacting a young student trying to pursue a career. If you can just listen, that's huge. And Gretchen Hoffman was one of those people that helped me. Amazing researcher. She does climate change at UCSB. Look her up.
That's great. Another question I'm seeing is, Catherine says that I love the STEM story and I feel like I need to do it myself. Can I ask why you recommend doing it? What did you ultimately get out of it?
Got it. The STEM story is really powerful in my experience, for young people of color to hear different stories. Oftentimes we hear the same story about science and it seems old, like it happened a long time ago and that it's not accessible to me. So if you have a current story that's living and breathing and you can share that with young people, that it's so huge when it comes to engaging and inspiring young people, because your story is in real time. It's your life. They're looking at you. You are that person, and it has a lasting and meaningful impact. And I found when running my social justice and activism STEM camp in the summertime, I find people and educators and scientists to share their true stories. That's so much better than me telling them about scientists that existed 20, 30, 40 years ago. For some reason, they really engage with the real-time, real story, STEM story that's going on.
Makes sense. And let's see, what are some barriers you encountered as a woman of color when applying for scholarships and other opportunities?
Oof. Okay. So this is a good one. And I'm going to this is my personal story when it comes to access and scholarships and all that. So some of the first barriers that I encountered had to do with resources. So there were all of these scholarships available, but I didn't have resources at the time, like a computer or internet to apply online. That was like a huge problem when I went to college, was getting connected to the resources. I didn't have the network. I didn't have the resources around me to actually pursue a lot of these scholarships and opportunities. And then when the scholarships and opportunities did come up, I couldn't physically go there because I had to have a summer job, or I had to take care of my family. I had to do other things. So those were some of the real barriers that I had to kind of overcome in order to get where I am. That Monterey internship worked out for me. That happened to be one internship opportunity that I could say yes to. But the life and the situation where I was at in Long Beach, California, here in California, it was just, I couldn't just leave and go do things. That's just the way my family situation was at the time.
I think a lot of people are in that situation, and I've found that with my students too. It's like a lot of these internships, you still have to pay to get there, or for housing or something, and that's something for us to think about when we're thinking about equity, for sure. Oh, this is a good one. What recommendations do you have for conquering the fear of the water as a non-swimmer? In your case, it seems your curiosity led you forward despite the fact that you weren't yet a swimmer.
Oh my gosh, terrified of the water. I think it was my curiosity. So I was terrified, yet I really wanted to be in the water. It's one of those things where you're just so fascinated by something. You want to touch it, you want to get in there, but you keep pulling back and going in and pulling back. So it just got to the point, I think it really took off after I went on my first deep submarine dive with remotely operated vehicles with a robot in the water and not necessarily me in the water. That was kind of the first step. And then after that, I was just like, I really just need to go for it. Just go for it. What's going to happen? And so I went for my scuba diving certification, which took much longer than I think anybody in history at UCLA, because I couldn't really swim. I remember specifically we had to do a swim test. First of all, everybody introduced themselves. And I remember everybody was like, oh yes, I've been a lifeguard for so many years and this and this and that. And I was like, I just love the ocean and I really want to get into the water. And the instructor said, all right, swim test, 14 laps. And everybody jumped in the water and they were swimming. I thought they were all Olympic swimmers, where I jumped in the water and I kind of floated a little bit, did a dog paddle, got on my back, just however I could get across the pool. Because in my life, that's swimming. When you jump into the water and you don't drown, you're swimming. But I learned pretty quickly that other people have other definitions of what swimming looks like. So really, I just kept at it. It was my curiosity. I was really driven, like I want to be in the water. So I continued and continued. The first time I took the scuba class at UCLA, they actually put me in a separate pool and had a separate instructor help me learn how to swim. And then I came back the next semester and did the full scuba class. And then just recently, I got my current open ocean certification just recently, as a way to teach my students that it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still go for it. And I am still a little bit terrified of the water, but once I'm in the water, it's all good.
That's great. Can you give us an example of a hostile environment or situation that people of privilege might not see?
Got it. So one of the things that constantly happens, and this is getting a little deep, I'm going to try and be transparent. As I was going through undergrad and graduate school, I constantly had to deal with what's called microaggressions. Now, these many microaggressions that happen to people of color are not like intentional aggressions, but they constantly happen. Like, oh, I see you're here, you must be on scholarship. Or, I thought Black people didn't like to swim. Just constant little comments that come out every now and then. But over time, they accumulate and they have a psychological cost. I mean, I definitely experienced psychological trauma from constant little microaggressions. Or you must be so happy and thankful that you're here in this program. Just constant little things like, does that mean I'm not supposed to be here? Are other people not as thankful? Like, I don't know. Those constant things, they weigh on you over time. And so those are some examples on how the hostile environment can be created. The other thing that I encountered is the system, the higher learning and education system was designed and set up for the success of white males, and it really hasn't changed a lot in many years. And so as a young African American woman, I had to deal with navigating a system that wasn't necessarily set up for my success. And that also has a psychological cost to it. So those are just a few examples of how overall, when I reflect, I'm like, yeah, that was kind of a hostile environment. And what can I do now as a person of color in charge of education and learning? What can I do to help support young people so they don't have to experience that environment like I did?
That's a great question and something for all of us to think about. Similarly, this question is, Our current socio-political structure can be described as hostile towards STEM and people of color. Sustainability, science, and education is extremely costly. How do you keep that spark of joy alive when these things may not be financially viable for students?
Can you say that one again? That was a long one.
I know. So just to kind of like summarize, how do you keep that spark alive for kids when there are these financial kinds of barriers in place for them to like move forward in this kind of career?
How do you keep the magic going? Like, how do you keep that curiosity going? That's a great question. And I think that has to do with, that's where I come back to telling stories. So I think we live in a time where I didn't recognize how important telling a story is. I mean, movies tell stories, the news tells stories, everybody is telling stories. People have Instagram accounts, they're telling stories about their life. So you have to become a good storyteller. And I think we as educators, we tell stories all the time in emails, in our lessons, in our presentations. If we can tell a good story, we can keep our audience captivated, and we can continue to inspire that imagination and that curiosity. So I'm a big fan of us as educators and even as scientists, specifically scientists right now. We need to learn how to tell the good story about our science so that people are engaged and listening and asking questions. Our stories need to be better than other narratives and other stories, like our stories of truth, our stories of exploration, our stories of science. They need to be the best stories they can be so that people are engaged and listen, and they're not listening to the thousands of other stories that we're bombarded with this day and age. That's my opinion.
Good advice. I like that. I have a couple of similar questions. People are asking if there are some specific national organizations or conferences where you recommend that STEM students, but also people of color in their careers, who should they be connecting with? How can they kind of prevent those feelings of isolation and find their community?
Well, I know for a fact that a lot of my students have benefited from going to the Student Development and Leadership Conference, the SDLC, and I can send information about that conference. That conference is specifically for students of color. Like, that's what its goal is. And its goal is to, I can write this down, let me see. Its goal is to provide a space for support, interracial, interethnic discourse to help enact real change in the lives of young people. Now, this is for that emotional and psychological support as students pursue different careers. It's not just for STEM, but I think it's really good for youngsters, young kids of color to come together and have an outlet to talk about these things and support each other as they go through and pursue whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
That's great. And I want to put a plug in for our student conference for NMEA. We often, we're not the most diverse organization, and we're trying to change that. But I think our student conferences traditionally have been, and I think it is a way for students to meet other, interested students in the field, and also to connect with, professionals in the field as well. So it's a great networking opportunity. But similar to that, what about for people who are already in the field? Are there any other associations that women and minorities in STEM, that maybe NMEA or NOAA should be connecting with, just to, better reach out and be supportive?
That's a good question. I know here I'm involved currently here in California. We have the We STEM initiative, which is the Women in STEM initiative, which is a partnership with the state of California and the mayor's office here in Los Angeles. The goal is to take this program national. And this is a program that is setting up networks and mentorship for women and people of color, specifically pursuing STEM. So in addition to going to conferences and looking online for resources, there's also really cool social media hashtags. So if you're an educator and you have a young person of color that's like really interested in science and STEM, there's social media hashtags where you can follow stories of people that are currently doing work. like She Can STEM. That's a really cool one to follow right there. And that's run by the Ad Council and MTV. Additionally, the We STEM program, we're working toward, I just had a conference call. We're working toward developing networking and mentoring opportunities, like a intentional network and mentorship program for women and students of color.
That's great. Thank you for those for sharing those resources for us to look into.
Oh yeah, there's so many. I would highly recommend using the social media resources to connect to the tell the story part, because that's a great way to engage your racially diverse audience in real-time stories of people working in STEM.
That's good advice, and no excuses for any of us to not be able to do that, right? It's acceptable as well. Any other questions? I think we've addressed most of the questions that have come in. Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you for letting me share my story and helping me develop my analogy to this hydrothermal vent research and my experience in STEM, and in partnership moving forward to just continue to support and engage a variety of communities in science, tech, engineering, and math, and specifically my own passion, the ocean and the deep sea.
Well, thank you. Your passion is very evident as you speak, and thank you for just starting the conversation with us, and for your honesty and for sharing all of your experiences. We really appreciate your time and your stories, and thanks to everyone who joined us this evening. It's been a fun way to spend our time, and we hope to see you again, Dijanna. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. Thanks so much, and hope to see y'all soon.